Let us finish Maseches Rosh HaShana. We are on the bottom of DAF Lamed Daled Amud Beis. We're at the two dots. Kishem sheshliach tzibur chayiv kach kol yachid v'yachid v'chulei. What the Gemara is quoting is from the Mishnah. There is a machlokas at the very end of the Mishnah. When you're davening b'tzibur, when you're davening where there's a shliach tzibur, a leader present, is he able to be motzi everyone or not? So the Chachamim say that just like a shliach tzibur has to say his amida, so too every member of the congregation has an obligation to say their own individual amida. They can't be yotze from the shliach tzibur. Rabbi Gamliel disagrees, and he says no, everyone can be yotze from the shliach tzibur. The shliach tzibur is allowed to be motzi everyone. So let's understand the machlokas. So Tanya, Amr lo Rabbi Gamliel lidvarecha lama tzibur mispalolin. According to you, Rabbi Gamliel, then why is there a shtil shmona esrei? Why is everyone davening the Amidah if they can all be yotze from the shliach tzibur? Amr lahem kidei lahasdir shliach tzibur tefilasa. It's a little bit of an unusual statement, but it's to allow the shliach tzibur time to organize his prayer. That seems to be what the Gemara is saying. We want to create a sort of pause in the prayers, so we tell the tzibur, you guys daven to yourselves. This will enable the shliach tzibur to prepare to say his Shemona Esrei, his Amida out loud in the proper fashion. Itamar Cohen, who comes to the earlier DAF, told me that there's a Yemenite custom that one individual who's not the Shliach Tzibur gets up before Shemona Esrei and recites the words so that to prepare the Shliach Tzibur for his Amida. Could be that this is based on this Gemara. Amr lehem Rabbi Gamliel l'divreichem lama shliach tzibur yard lifnei hateva. So Rabbi Gamliel is recorded as saying to the sages, according to you, who require each individual to say his own Shemona Esrei, well then why do you need a shliach tzibur at all to repeat the Shemona Esrei if everyone has said it? So Amr lo kedei lahotzi es she'eino baki. The purpose is only to be motzi someone who is not well versed, but those who are well versed in the words of the liturgy, they cannot be yotze. So Amar Lahem Kishem Shemotzi She'eno Baki Kach Motzi Asabaki. Rabbi Gamliel disagrees. He says just like the Shliach Tzibur can be motzi a non-expert, he can also be motzi an expert. Amar Rabba Bar Barchana Amar Rabbi Yechanan Modim Chachamim LeRabbi Gamliel. So Rabba Bar Barchana tells us that according to Rabbi Yochanan, the Chachamim finally relented and they agreed to Rabbi Gamliel that the Shliach Tzibur can be motzi everyone. V'Rav Amar Adayin Hi Machlokes. Rav disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan, and he says no, the Chachamim did not assent, and it's still a Machlokes. Shama Rabbi Chia Berei de Rabba Bar Nachmeni. So Rabbi Chia, the son of Rabba Bar Nachmeni, hears that this is the discussion. Azal Amar L'Shmaita Kamei de Rav Dimi Bar Chinina. And he goes and repeats this whole discussion to Rav Dimi. Amar lei hachi amar Rav adayin hi machlokas, and he tells him that I heard that in the name of Rav that it's still a machlokas. The Chachamim never assented. So Amar lei Rabbi Bar Barchana nami hachi ka amar, and Rav Dimi responds to him, yes, Taka, that's what Rabbi Bar Barchana quoted Rav as saying also. In other words, he was just corroborating that according to Rav there still remains a machlokas. Ki amar Rabbi Yochanan lahashmaita af legalei reish lakish. It's not clear, it's a little bit ambiguous whether this is an independent statement or whether this is part of a citation that he's making from Rabbi Bar Barchana. But the bottom line is that when Rabbi Yochanan had said that the Chachamim finally assented, then not only did Rav disagree with Rabbi Yochanan, but Rabbi Yochanan's colleague and student, Reish Lakish, also disagreed and told him no, the Chachamim still disagree. So now let's challenge, since when did Rabbi Yochanan say that there's finally consensus and that everyone agrees that the Shliach Tzibur can be motzi the Tzibur? V'ha'amar Rabbi Chana Tzipora, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Hilchasa Karabban Gamliel. Rabbi Yochanan was cited as saying that the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel. Anytime you tell me the halacha is like someone, Hilchasa Michlal de Pligi, that implies that someone disagrees, because otherwise you don't have to tell me the halacha is like so-and-so if that's the universally agreed halacha. So this halacha cannot be universally agreed upon, as Rabbi Yochanan had suggested. The Gemara answers, Kisolik Rabbi Abba Miyami, that when Rabbi Abba came from Miami. No, that's not what it means, of course. It means that when Rabbi Abba came from the ocean area, in other words, he had taken a long trip, went south for the winter, right? And then he came back from Miami. He came back from the oceans. That's what the word Yami means, right? So maybe that's how Miami got its name. I don't know. But when he came back from his trip, he said, Pirsha modim chachamim l'Rabban Gamliel bibracha shel Rosh HaShana v'shel Yom HaKippurim. He explained that it's not, both statements are true. The statement that the Chachamim finally assented and the statement that they still disagree, both of them can be correct. How so? Bibracha shel Rosh HaShana v'shel Yom HaKippurim, when it comes to the blessings, the Shmona Esrei of the high holidays, that's where the Chachamim agreed to Rabban Gamliel that the Shliach Tzibur can be motzi everyone. V'halacha michlal depligi bibrachas techol hashana. And when did the Chachamim still hold their ground and still disagree with Rabban Gamliel? For the Amidah of the rest of the year. In other words, they would hold that every day other than the high holidays, if you know how to daven Shemona Esrei, you can't be yotzi from the Shliach Tzibur. But for the high holidays, even if you know the liturgy, you can be yotzi from the Shliach Tzibur. So the Gemara says, Eini, is this really so? V'hamar Rabbi Chana Tzipara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halacha kerama Gamliel bebracha shel Rosh HaShana v'shel Yom HaKippurim. But look at this statement. This statement was stated by the same Rabbi Chana Tzipara in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel specifically for the high holiday liturgy. So it sounds like the Chachamim argue with Rabbi Gamliel dafka with the high holiday liturgy. So clearly we're distinguishing, we agree with you that we're distinguishing and saying that the high holiday liturgy is somewhat different in some situation. But you still see that there's still a machlokus by there also, and that the Chachamim disagree. So Ela Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Man Modim Rabbi Meir V'halacha Michlal Depligi Rabbanan. So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak gives us a new answer, and he says, I grant you that there is a distinction between the high holidays and the rest of the year. But even within the high holidays, where some of the Chachamim agree to Rabban Gamliel, not all of them do. What do I mean by some of them? Rabbi Meir acknowledges that Rabban Gamliel is correct when it comes to the high holidays, that the Shliach Tzibur can be motzi everyone. But the other Chachamim, other than Rabbi Meir, still hold their ground and disagree. And they hold that if you know how to daven on your own, you cannot be yotzi from the Shliach Tzibur. D'Tanya, Bracha shel Rosh HaShana v'shel Yom HaKippurim Shliach Tzibur motzi Rabbi b'dei Chavasim div Rabbi Meir v'Chachamim omrim kishem Shliach Tzibur chayev kachol yachid v'yachid chayev. As the Brisa details, that according to Rabbi Meir, that on the high holidays the Shliach Tzibur can be motzi everyone, and the Chachamim say no, even on the high holidays everyone has to daven their own Shemona Esrei. So my shnahani. So now the Gemara says, okay, why are you making this distinction? Why are we having only this discussion by the Yomim Noraim? What makes it special? So ilay memishum denafishi kroi. Maybe you'll tell me because there are extra verses in the Amida of the high holiday liturgy. So the Gemara says, but wait a minute. V'ha'amar Rav Chananel amar Rav kevin shomar u'v'sarascha kasuv leimar shuvein otzarich. But 1 second, Rav was quoted as saying is that as long as a person says, we'll do everything as it is written in your Torah, then you don't have to actually cite the actual verses in the Amida, as long as you say, we serve you Hashem as it is written in your Torah. Now, the question is, what part of the liturgy is this referring to? Rashi says, this can't be referring to Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros, because we learned in a previous Gemara that everyone agrees, or at least there's a machlokes, but as far as the minimum number of verses that you have to say for each one of the blessings of Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros. How now can Rav suggest that you don't have to say any verses at all? So therefore Rashi concludes that we're not talking about that section of the Amida. We're talking about the Amida which talks about the sacrificial order of Rosh HaShana and Yom Kippur. There it's easy for a person to get confused because it's difficult to remember the sacrificial order. And so therefore you might have thought that that's why there's a special allowance, according to some rabbis, for you to be yotze from the Shliach Tzibur, because it's confusing even for a baki, even for an expert, and that's why. But the Gemara says, but wait a minute, Rav says you don't have to cite the actual verses of the sacrificial order. You can just say, we'll serve you with the karbanos as is written in your Torah, and fartik, and your yotze. So why should there be a special dispensation to be yotze from the Shliach Tzibur and Rosh HaShana and Yom Kippur? Tosfos is not so happy with that. Tosfos quotes from Rabbeinu Tam that even when it comes to the 10 verses that you have to say for each Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros, the Gemara citing Rav is of the opinion that as long as you haven't started the verses, you can just say, we declare you God King as is cited in your Torah. And we declare you, God, that you remember us as is cited in your Torah. And we want you to remember us with the shofar as is cited in your Torah. What about the requirement that you have no less than 10 verses according to the Chachamim? That's once you start reciting verses, you got to continue. But if you don't say anything at all, you can just say, rub-a-dub-dub, as is written in your Torah, right? You just do it.
It's the first Rosh HaShana davening.
Right. It's the shortest Rosh HaShana davening, yeah. You can be done in half an hour, right?
The Gemara's are not exactly that much harder on Rosh HaShana than they are on Yom Tov.
Well, it's not that they're harder, it's just that they're harder to remember because you have to know how many bulls and how many rams and how many goats.
No, but I'm saying it's harder on Sukkot, remembering which day and
we're not even talking about Sukkot. We're not even talking about Sukkot yet.
The idea that it would be harder on Rosh Hashanah would naturally be because of all those verses.
I mean, your question is why Dafka Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur would say all Moadim. So we'll see. The Gemara is going to allude to that in just a moment. So the Gemara says, okay. So I just wanted to point out there's this machlokas between Rashi and Tosfos. But anyway, the bottom line is Ela mishum da'avshi brachos. So you're right, it's not because of the extra biblical citations that are in the Amida, because you could dispense with those, but rather because there's the extra brachos that you have to say. I mean, it's just a longer Amida, there's more to remember, and therefore there's a special dispensation that you can be Yosef from the Shlich Tzibur, at least according to Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Meir. So Gufa, let's go back. Amar Rav Chananel, Amar Rav Kevin, Shomer B'Sarascha, Kasuv Leimor, Shuveno Tzarech. That once you say, God will serve you as it is written in your Torah, then you don't have to cite the specific verbiage of the Torah. Savra mina hanimili biyachad aval b'tzibur lo. The initial thinking that statement was only a dispensation when you're davening privately, but if the shliach tzibur is leading the davening, then he doesn't have a right to abridge the davening to that degree. So Itmar Amar of Yeshua ben Levi echad yachid ve'echad tzibur kevin shomer b'sarasva k'suv leimor shuveno tzarech. But comes along Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and says even further. He says no, even a shliach tzibur is allowed to abridge the davening as long as he acknowledges that there are biblical citations that he is not mentioning. Okay? Amar Rabbi Lazar, la'olam yasdir adam tfilaso ve'achar kach yispalel. This Gemara is cited in other places, but it is very consistent with what we said before, that it's necessary for the shliach tzibur to prepare the words of davening. Remember, we don't have sidurim, right? By the way, why is it called a siddur? Because it allows the person to be misader tfilotav. It allows you to organize your words because you have them right in front of you. It's the same terminology that we're using. A person should always organize his words of prayer and only then begin siddur, and then he should begin davening.
What is machzor?
Machzor is something that you come back to periodically, right? Amar Rabbi Abba mistavra milsei de Rabbi Elazar bebracha shel Rosh Hashanah v'Shem HaKippurim b'shel prakim aval dechol Hashanah lo. So comes along Rabbi Abba and he says, Rabbi Elazar's requirement to organize your words before you start makes sense when you're dealing with infrequent prayers, such as the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur davening and the festival davening, right? Or with slichas probably didn't exist in the times of the Gemara. But when it comes to prayers that you say every day, the daily Amida, it's not necessary because we assume you already are very familiar with it, and you don't have to spend time sort of preparing to say the words. Aini, is this really so? Rav Yehuda misaret slosei umatzli. But 1 second, we have a story about Rav Yehuda, who every time he davened Shemona Esrei would organize his words in advance. So even sounds like even the weekday. The Gemara answers, Shiny Rav Yehuda kevin demitlas in yomin, letlas in yomin havamatzli kiprakim dami. So the Gemara gives a very strange answer. It says Rav Yehuda was the exception. Rav Yehuda only davened once every 30 days. And as a result, it was because it was that infrequent, it was like Yontif davening for him every time he davened. So he had to organize his prayers. No, just personally, it sounds like. The question is,
what the heck is that about? Yeah.
As Bob said, what the heck is that about, right? So the answer is that the Gemara says that Rav Yehuda would go through the entire Torah Shebichtav and Torah Shebal Peh once every 30 days. And because he was so immersed in Torah study, he felt justified and exempt from all other mitzvahs, including tefillah. So if you are of that caliber of scholar, that you're around the clock studying Torah, what? Osek b'mitzvah, pater min mitzvah. Yeah, he's engaged in the mitzvah Talmud Torah, so he was justified in exempting himself. Okay. Amar Rav Acha bar Avira, Amar Rav Shimon Chasida, Poter Haya Rabbi Gamliel Afilu Am Shebesados, Velo Mibayan Dekai Mihacha. So Rav Acha bar Avira said that according to Rav Shimon Chasida, Rabbi Gamliel would say that even if you're not listening to the Shliach Tzibur, but you're out in the field, for whatever reason, while he's reciting his Amida, you can be Yotzei from his Shmon Esrei.
Wow.
Even if you don't hear it.
Even if you don't hear it.
You have to be in shul.
And he says, and that goes without saying that if you're out in the field, you can be Yotzei, then even the folks in the village can also be Yotzei. So the Gemara says, Adarabba, wait a minute. Just the opposite is logical. Hani anisi, hani lo anisi. 1 second. The people out in the field have no choice. They're forced to be workers. There I could hear a justification of them to be Yotzi. But if you're in the village already, so step into shul. Right? The fact that you're not stepping into shul is an indication that you have little regard for the prayers. And we should not allow you to be Yotze. So the Gemara says, Detani Abba Berei de Rav Binyamin Barchia Am Shacharei HaKohanim Einim B'chlal Bracha. Like we find a precedent by Birkas Kohanim, by the Duchening, that if you don't step in the shul and face the Kohanim, but rather you go outside, then you're not going to be Yotze. By the way, that's also true if you turn around when the Kohanim are Duchening. This Gemara applies to you as well. There's a very unfortunate minhag ta'os, an erroneous custom that takes place, that people are so fearful of looking at the Kohanim during Duchening that they turn around. This is a great error in halacha. It is a very serious and grave mistake. If you ever see someone doing that, it's your obligation to correct them, because what they are doing is, instead of being machmir, they are in effect losing the bracha of duchening by turning around.
They're not being machmir. They just. I daven in many shuls like that. They have no idea.
They have no idea.
The whole shul turns around.
The whole shul turns around, but it's an erroneous custom.
I'm not sure at all.
It's an erroneous custom, and it's a mitzvah to correct people based on this Gemara.
I agree.
Right? So the Gemara says, Ela ki asa Rabin Amar Reb Yaakov Bar Idi Amar Reb Shimon Chasida Lo Poter Rabbi Gamliel Ela Am Shebesados. But rather says, the statement of Rabbi Gamliel really was, or Reb Shimon Chasida really was, that only the people out in the fields who have a legitimate excuse as to why they cannot be in shul because they're forced because of labor or whatever the issues are, they cannot be in the vicinity of a shul, they can be yotzei. But the people who are, right, this is my time, because they're forced to work, they don't have a choice to come and listen to the davening. Aval be'ir, but if they're in the village, and they have the ability to walk into the Beis HaKnesses to listen to the Shliach Tzibur, they will not be Yotzei if they don't come. Hadron Alach Yom Tov Uslik Ala Maseches Rosh HaShana. We're talking about davening any time. If a person wants to be Yotzei with the blessings of the Shliach Tzibur, according to Rabbi Gamliel, you can be Yotzei throughout the year. Let's begin the Mishnah of the Mishnah of Maseches Tainis. It sounds like you're getting a dispensation if you have to be at work. However, take a look at the Shulchan Aruch. Don't paskin halacha from the Gemara.
The two lessons to replace the korbanos, it makes sense because not everybody will be korban.
Correct. But take a look at the Shulchan Aruch. And from a halachic standpoint, we don't allow you to exempt yourself from the Shliach Tzibur Bizman Hazeh. Okay, the Mishnah now says, Me'emasai maskirin, it will go very quickly, Me'emasai maskirin gevuros geshamim. From what point in the year do we make mention of God's might in His bringing of rain, which is what we call Mashiv HaRuach U'Morid HaGeshem? At what point in the year do we start? Rabbi Eliezer Omer Miyom Tov HaRishon Shel Chag, and Rabbi Yeshua Omer Miyom Tov HaAchron Shel Chag. Rabbi Eliezer says from the first day of Sukkot, and Rabbi Yeshua says from the last day, which is Shmini Atzeres. That's when you begin saying Mashiv HaRuach. Amar lo Rabbi Yehoshua hol vein hageshamim elasimim klala b'chag lamahu maskir. Rabbi Yeshua says, I don't understand why you should start saying Mashiv HaRuach on the first day of Sukkot. Rain is a sign of a curse if it rains on Sukkot. As the Gemara says, that this is the Mishnah had said in Sukkah that this is analogous to a servant who comes to bring a drink to his master, and the master takes the drink and instead of drinking it, splashes it in his face or pours it all over his shirt. The point is that if God makes it rain, He's saying, I don't want you in the Sukkah. I don't want your mitzvah. So why would you mention the idea of God bringing rain? So Amar lo Rabbi Eliezer, Afani lo amarti lishol elo lahaskir, Mashiv HaRuach U'Morid HaGeshem ba'onasa. Rabbi Eliezer says, I'm not suggesting that you request, that you petition God for rain. I'm suggesting that this is the time when you begin to praise God for bringing rain in its time. So you're not actually asking for rain today. You're saying, God, you're amazing because you bring rain when the world needs rain. So Amar lo im kein la'olam yehi mazkir. So if that's the case, as Rabbi Yoshua, then you should mention it every day, not just starting with Sukkot, but say it in the summer as well. Say Mashiv Ruach Umarid HaGeshem. Tosfos brings a brisa that records the further back and forth between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. The Rabbi Eliezer says that you're right. Technically, a person, if he wanted to, could say Mashiv Ruach Umarid HaGeshem during the summer, but there's no obligation. The obligation only begins when the rain tends to start to fall. And that starts around Sukkot time. And that's why you praise God, not asking Him for rain, but praising Him for bringing rain in its time, which is starting now. And comes along Rabbi Yehoshua and says, but still, it's a siman klala, so you shouldn't mention it. It's more important to worry about the siman klala than it is to start praising God in advance. And Rabbi Eliezer says, no, I feel it's more important to start praising God because you have to prepare yourself, you have to praise the king before you start making petitions of Him. So start praising Him as soon as possible, which starts with Sukkot, and then eventually you'll start saying V'sein talumat or livracha later on in the season. Next, Ein shoel inas hageshamim elasamach legeshamim. So the Mishnah then says that you only request God for rain, which means what we say is V'sein talumatar. You only ask for rain when it's time for it to rain. You don't ask for rain when rain is not anticipated. It's not the rain season yet. Reb Yehuda Omer, ha'over lifnei ha'teva b'yom tov ha'acharon shel chag, ha'acharon mazkir, ha'rishon eino mazkir. Reb Yehuda says that if a person is leading the davening on the final day, because we go like Rabbi Yoshua, and he's leading the davening on Shmini Atzeres, so only the guy who's the acharon, meaning the one who's davening musaf, he makes mention of Mashiv HaRuach, but the first one does not make mention. So you make the transition in musaf. B'yom tov harishon shel Pesach, harishon maskir, ha'acharon eino maskir. And conversely, when it comes to the first day of Pesach, when we do what we call Tfilas Tal, when we stop saying Mashiv HaRuach, the Baal Shacharis says Mashiv HaRuach, and the Baal Musaf omits it and does not say it. And of course, the question is why? Why is Musaf the transition point?
Same answer you gave the other day.
Same answer I gave the other day. It's brought down in the tour. It's very simple because that's when most people are in shul. A lot of people don't come until Musaf time, and therefore you have to demarcate the transition in Musaf because if you do it in Shacharis, people won't be around to hear you. Have a wonderful day, everyone.